In the summer of 2005, Israel fulfilled its strategic decision to unilaterally remove its civilian residents and military presence from the Gaza Strip. The decision, and its implementation, brought an end to almost 40 years of Israeli presence in the Gaza Strip. The decision entailed tremendous financial costs, a rupture in the spiritual fabric of Israeli society, and security risks. Nevertheless, the decision was made for the benefit of promoting a process of change between Israel and the Palestinians, a process that would allow the Palestinian Authority to take full security control over their territories, demonstrate state-like behavior, and bring about peace, quiet, and prosperity to the civilian residents on both sides of the border. Unfortunately, this was not to be. By the beginning of 2006, parliamentary elections in the Palestinian Authority brought Hamas to power, the successful manipulation of the democratic process by anti-democratic forces. The newly achieved stately stature of Hamas did not, however, influence their radical worldviews and extremist policies. Apart from Mahmoud Abbas himself, Hamas now made up the entire Palestinian government, but still refused to recognize Israel's right to exist, to cease and desist from carrying out terrorist attacks, or even to recognize previous agreements reached between the Palestinian Authority and Israel. Following the formation of the Hamas government, and despite the absence of any Israeli presence in the Gaza Strip, terrorist attacks continued to be carried out alongside an increase in the rate of weapons smuggling into the Gaza Strip. Hamas's forced buildup does not occur in a vacuum, but is an integral part of a larger context in which both Hamas and Hezbollah receive indoctrination, financing, training, weapons, and intelligence from Iran. On the 25th of June 2006, Hamas further escalated the situation by launching an unprovoked attack into sovereign Israeli territory, killing 2 IDF soldiers and kidnapping another, Gilad Shalit, with the express intention of holding him hostage and using him as human ransom. Just 1 year would pass before Hamas once again pushed the region into unprecedented chaos by launching a violent putsch in the Gaza Strip, killing, exiling, and persecuting their fellow Palestinians associated with the recognized leadership of Mahmoud Abbas. This violent move was severely criticized not only by Western leaders, but by leaders from the Arab world as well. Clearly, rather than bringing about moderation, Hamas's parliamentary and government control encouraged greater daring and extremism. Radical Islam was now being freely indoctrinated amongst the Gaza population, imbuing the masses with hatred against Jews and Israelis, and inciting towards further violence. Hamas radicalization of the Gaza Strip and its constant momentum of escalation did not go unchecked. Effective Israeli security measures, in conjunction with international pressure, brought about an Egyptian brokered state of calm agreement in June of 2008. Unfortunately, the so-called state of calm expressed little more than an aspiration as rockets continued to fall on Israeli territory and weaponry continued to flow freely into Hamas stockpiles. By the second week of December, Hamas unilaterally terminates the state of calm agreement, validating its intention by initiating a barrage of rocket and mortar fire into Israeli territory. On the final evening of the disengagement, an IDF officer locked the last remaining gate between Israel and the Gaza Strip with the intention of never returning. The Palestinians were now left to themselves, with no remaining Israelis to serve as an excuse for continuing their attacks. Since that moment, rather than embarking on a constructive path towards a final status agreement, Hamas has marched directly toward confrontation with Israel, escalating the threats at every opportunity. Every state has the explicit obligation of protecting the security of its citizens. No state would stand by idly as a terrorist entity sitting along its border victimizes its civilian population by rocket and mortar attacks, and carries out a forced buildup through the illicit smuggling of massive quantities of weapons and ammunition that not only endanger, but actively target ever-growing numbers of its civilian population. Operation Cast Lead is a reaction to Hamas's actions, a necessity incurred by Hamas alone. As for the operation itself, it is interesting to juxtapose the methods of operation of both sides. While the IDF makes every effort to spare casualties amongst non-combatants, Hamas intentionally targets civilians. The IDF invests tremendous efforts in developing doctrine, training, and the use of sophisticated weaponry for pinpoint attacks, bringing to a minimum collateral damage of any kind. Hamas, however, aims its weapons at population centers for the express purpose of causing as many civilian casualties as possible. Furthermore, while the IDF is engaged in a high-intensity military operation, it allocates considerable attention to the well-being of the civilian population by facilitating and supplying humanitarian aid. This, contrasted by Hamas's cynical use of its own civilian population as human shields behind which it hides its weapon stores and fires rockets into Israel. Hamas has traditionally misunderstood Israel's restraint as weakness. They were mistaken. Our restraint derived from the strength of our defense forces and the endurance of our society. But our tolerance has been stretched beyond reasonable limits. Israeli civilian lives cannot be the price of our tolerance. Since the beginning of Operation Cast Lead, Hamas has drastically increased its attacks against Israel as the range of its rockets has reached unprecedented depths into the Israeli home front. Within the context of its right to self-defense, Israel is and will remain unwavering in its commitment to ensure the security of all of its citizens.